Hi, everyone. Happy Tuesday to you. It's Alan Schimmel. Are there clouds on the horizon for cloud native? OpenAI is now acquisitive and more. You're watching Techstrong, gang. Hi, everyone. It's Alan Schimmel, Techstrong Group here for another episode of the Techstrong Gang. It's Tuesday. We're getting towards the end of June. It's summer. It's warm for many of you. I hope for those of you in the Midwest of the U.S., you're not too affected by this flooding and everything else. But as usual, there's a lot of news out in tech. We're going to we picked three topics we want to jump in on here today. But before we do, let me introduce you to today's gang members who are in attendance. First of all, joining us, he's back home in Colorado. He is he's the CTO here at Techstrong, as well as a chief technology advisor with the Futurum Group. The one and only Mitchell Ashley. Hey, Mitchell, did I get that right?
You can introduce me anytime, Alan, of course.
Okay.
Good to be with everybody today.
Absolutely. Next, joining us from way out in the West Coast. Well, the West Coast, it's not that way out. But he's an editor here at Techstrong and newly minted editor at Techstrong, but well known in our field. It's our friend John Swartz. Hey, John, welcome.
Hey, Alan. Good to be here.
Okay. And speaking of Midwest floods, I hope he's not getting anybody where he lives, but he's also the founder of Tech Field Day and Gestalt IT, and he's a certified Techstrong Gang member, Stephen Foskett. Hi, Stephen. Any floods out by you? Everything okay?
Well, it rained cats and dogs yesterday for a little while, but then the sun came back out, so we're all right. We can handle it.
That's that Midwest attitude. You got to love it. We can handle it. All right. And joining us here in the studio to my immediate left, it's easy to tell the two apart here, but to my immediate left is our Echo Insight analyst and sustainable IT editor, Bonnie Schneider. Hi, Bonnie.
Hi, Alan.
Welcome. And then on my far left, it was a bad weekend for the Yankees, so I won't say anything Yankee-wise, but it's our chief content officer, Mike Vizard. Hey, Mike.
Good to see you as always.
Good to see you. So, state of cloud native, you want to kick this one?
Yeah, in the last, say, 6 weeks, there's been no less than 5 different studies put out about the adoption of cloud native and Kubernetes and all the things that's going on around that. I think a lot of it was tied to the 10th anniversary of Kubernetes, but sometimes I feel like when you're looking at one research report, it's kind of like looking at a keyhole and trying to see what's on the other side of the room. And when you get 5 of them, suddenly you get some visibility into this. And what's interesting is it seems like Kubernetes has finally maybe crossed that proverbial chasm in the enterprise. There's enough clusters out there to suggest that the default option now for new applications is to build them in a cloud native format. There's a lot of mixed stuff out there. There's still a ton of monolithic apps out there and a lot of complexity and a lot of challenges to deal with. And of course, there are always security issues. But Stephen, let's start with you. Is it your sense something is going on here? I feel like this has kind of been a trend that we've been talking about for half a decade, but is it finally happening?
Well, isn't that funny how things like this happen and things like this kind of get real? We all get excited about new technology. We're all excited about the possibilities. We get all hyped on the buzzwords. And then things get real. People start realizing what things can and can't do, and the reality of moving applications from conventional infrastructure into cloud native. And we saw that happen with virtualization. I think we absolutely are seeing it. First off, I'll have to say there's remarkable consistency across all of these studies in terms of the numbers, the approach, the embrace of Kubernetes, but the fact that real enterprise cloud native applications, microservices applications is lagging. But I guess lagging who? Lagging what? Does anyone really expect enterprises to wholesale move everything from conventional monolithic apps to microservices-based cloud native apps in just a couple of years? Of course not. That being said, they are absolutely adopting Kubernetes. We've been seeing this as we've been going to KubeCon. I know that you guys are there. Tech Field Day has been there. We're going to be there again. It's become the new VM world. It's become the new enterprise application conference, because that is where enterprises are going. I think there's been a lot of buzz about, VMware, Broadcom, which virtualization platform do I switch to? Frankly, that's the wrong conversation. Everybody's going toward Kubernetes. And not only that, but people are embracing multiple Kubernetes. They're embracing multiple platform as a service. And yeah, it's taken them a while to get there. For me, I think the big question is, are the applications being deployed on Kubernetes truly cloud native apps, or is this just another vSphere? Are they basically containerizing monolithic apps and putting them up there and calling it kind of done for now? Or are we going to see real adoption of cloud native?
Mm-hmm. So we used to call that cloud washing, right? When you would just take your old app and shove it up on the cloud and cloud wash it.
Or lift and shift was the other.
It wasn't really taking advantage of the cloud. But look, here's the deal. The war over what is the right infrastructure to use for greenfield projects, for new applications, was fought and won years ago. I think whether you look at AWS or Google or Azure, something like 75 or 80% or more of brand new applications are done on a cloud-native containerized infrastructure. The real, as it always is, where wars are won and lost, is in the brown muddy fields, right? And that's, to your point, Mike, that's what's happening is, do I want to convert my monolithic, my old application that works okay to a multi-threaded, cloud native kind of application? And that's a big job for a lot of these companies. And if there's not overwhelming advantages to doing so, they won't. That's as simple as it comes. But two clouds on the horizon for me when it comes to the cloud native stuff. Number one is Kubernetes is still way too hard. It's just hard. And number two, though they've made some progress, number two, the bigger issue is open source. Because as much as cloud native is sort of the new VM world, or KubeCon is the new VM world, what drives that event is the open source community. And the open source community is under siege here on a couple of fronts. The biggest thing is on security. This was it the XYZ or XY? XZ has everybody thinking, are there sleeper cells? Are there time bombs in my open source project that I'm using? Number two, the commercial viability of open source models. When you have companies like Hashi and Red Hat and others who are changing their licensing, it's creating, we had a report from Mitch last week, or yesterday actually, on SUSE, right? They seem to be filling that vacuum because they're kind of that classic open source model. But the whole open source business model, I think, is being questioned right now. And those are the kinds of things that I think can undermine this whole cloud native infrastructure, because the cloud native stack is an open source stack. Make no mistake about it.
Mitchell, there's a lot to unpack there. So let me ask you a couple of questions. If I take a monolith and I containerize it and I stick it on Kubernetes, a lot of folks are just calling that a big ass microservice, right? And they're just kind of looking at it and saying, everything is kind of a microservice. It's just a question of size now. And over time, I will take the monolith and chop it up into microservices when I'm good and ready. So is the whole argument over software architectures just become, to his analogy, a muddy brown field, and we're just using stuff where we feel like we need it?
Well, I think the way, Alan described it of greenfield, sure, you're going to start out cloud native, meaning you're going to do containers, you're going to look at microservices, maybe service mesh, right? You're going to build it in sort of a modern contemporary architecture. But that's very little of the world that most enterprises work in. And they rarely, even in modernization efforts, don't replace whole applications whole scale, not across the board. Those are major tasks I can't tell you the number of new billing system projects. I worked in telcos. Every 3 years there was a new billing replacement project, and none of them ever lasted very long. That's why they occurred every 3 years. It is hard to justify replacing an application to change the technology that it's using, even just an underlying database. It doesn't make sense to do. It makes more sense, and containerizing things is a really easy thing to do because it's a packaging concept. It's delivering the app and everything that it needs into one container. Okay, great, you've got it containerized, at least in one or maybe a few. It's not a microservice. It's still the same monolith application. But what makes more sense is 99% of that app may need to just kind of stay the way it is. What it's doing is okay. That's not what we need to fix. That's not what we need to modernize. We're doing business differently over here. So go build in a cloud native with microservices, containerized, et cetera. Build that new functionality, and it talks to the old monolith application through its kind of the M&M external APIs, right? Kind of in and out, and that's really what its APIs do, not inside the app, and build the functionality that you need to get it out faster, iterate on it faster, maybe develop more capabilities that you want in that or multiple applications. So you live in this hybrid world, and we don't talk about that in cloud native land, but that's really the land that enterprises work in. And so I think that's why the other reason why you see Kubernetes being adopted so well is, how do you manage all this stuff? Okay, now I got 1,000, 10,000, more than 10,000 containers. How do I operate this stuff? That's what Kubernetes does very well for cloud native applications, but people manage their DevOps toolchain pipeline using Kubernetes for the different parts of it. It's just an easier, better way not only to manage it, but scale it and use some of the advantages of Now, those aren't cloud native apps. That's just infrastructure, the new VMware, to Stephen's point.
Yeah, and to Mitch's point here too, absolutely. You just don't see people taking, just completely rehashing the entire enterprise application environment. It's not going to happen. I can't think of any enterprises, especially large ones, banks and those kind of, they haven't rewritten some of their applications since they were deployed decades ago. There's going to be mainframes, there's going to be open systems, there's going to be virtualized apps, there's going to be cloud native apps, and they're all going to be working together. I think that's just the practical reality of the situation. But let me tell you, speaking as an old school sysadmin, containerization, love it. Absolutely love it. If I was deploying an application today, would it be in a container? Absolutely. There's no way I would deploy anything without it.
We have seen this buzzword application modernization for decades now. And if I listen to those guys, it's not really happening. So do people go back in to modernize applications, or is that kind of like an exercise in maintenance?
No. So Mitchell got it dead on. You don't need to, you only modernize what you need to. So we're seeing this a lot in mainframe applications, right? Dollar for dollar, penny for penny. It's hard to do better, be more efficient, more secure than the mainframe. However, a lot of mainframe applications are bifurcating into systems of records and systems of engagement, where I want that stability, security, performance on my systems of record. But for engagement, I want to be, I want an interface for the phone and for this and that. And I'll keep that front end, if you will. I'll put it up on the cloud. And if I'm doing that and I'm putting it on the cloud, I might as well multi-thread it and use Kubernetes and a cloud native infrastructure to do it. And, kudos to the modern mainframe teams with like Project Zoe and stuff like this, where you actually have the ability to do that and have them talk to each other. It's a pretty cool thing. So that is a form of app modernization. Now, there are other people, when they talk mainframe app modernization, who really means let's move off the mainframe. And there's a segment of the market that's going to do that too, I guess. Though if you've already invested millions, if not billions of dollars in mainframes, who the hell wants to do that? But I think the point, Mike, if I could wrap a bow on it, is business does what it needs to do when it needs to do it. No one's going to, or very few people are going to multi-thread their application and modernize it just because it's the cool thing to do this week. If it makes sense, they'll do it. And I've said this story before. Caveat to that story, Hertz. They moved to this beautiful new world headquarters here on the west coast of Florida near Bonita Springs, and I don't remember the name of the town right now. But they decided they were going to move to the cloud. And they just, rather than migrating, built from scratch new cloud apps. And once they turned the lights on those, they shut the lights on the data center app. And they did, and they touted this as the way to go. There wasn't really a migration per se. It was a clear, bifurcation, old, new. And that went well till they went into bankruptcy and they fired that CIO. So, there's your experience.
Stephen, one of the surveys points out to the prevalence of Java in these new cloud-native application environments. And do you think Java is going to be with us forever, or is Java kind of the new COBOL, and this is the thing that we're eventually going to replace as part of this motion? I mean, is Java here with us forever?
I would say that Java would, surprisingly, Java is probably here with us for a long time. And one of the reasons for it might be shocking to people who love to dismiss things as old technology. Java lends itself really well to app modernization. And there's a bunch of companies in the app modernization space who've come up with really excellent ways of converting monolithic Java applications into microservices. Frankly, I think that could be low-hanging fruit. Doesn't mean they're moving away from Java, but we could end up with a new Java renaissance here in terms of Java-powered microservices.
Mitchell, I want to throw a wrench into this. If I look at some of this AI stuff, one of the things that's interesting about it is it makes it a lot easier to reverse engineer an existing application. And I think it was AWS was talking about rewriting an entire Java application inside of 2 months or so using AI tools that they have. So are we maybe underestimating or overestimating what it might take to rewrite a lot of this stuff in the future, and we will modernize?
Crawl, walk, run, Mike. We're not anywhere close to being able to do that. Yes, we can give AI co-pilots and Gen AI code and say, rewrite this code and add this to it. And it will do some interesting stuff to you, but it doesn't design systems. It doesn't design architectures. Today. Will it? Sure, of course. I think it absolutely will. And it will be a major, major aid, if not driver of a lot of what we do down the road. We're just not there yet. So, like the CIO who suggests we need to replace all of our apps with Rust tomorrow, that's a pretty tough sell because they won't be around here for the second budget cycle. It's certainly not the third budget cycle. They won't be here. Java's here to stay. Java's a fine language. I don't know the percentage of applications that are written in Java, but it's massive. Whenever you talk to enterprises, you talk about Java. They have large implementations of Java in most cases. And like you said, it's a modern language. I mean, it is more object-oriented and written. It's not like, some COBOL app or something written in a really ancient, archaic language.
Somewhere Scott McNeely is smiling.
And a guy named Gosling is laughing.
Yeah.
I want to ask you one other question about all this. We've talked about platform engineering in other shows. I somehow feel in my mind that platform engineering becomes the thing that we use to kind of make Kubernetes and all these things more accessible. You hear people talking about internal developer portals, and, are they two sides of the same coin? This whole shift to cloud native and Kubernetes and platform engineering, they all go together.
They can. I don't know if it's peanut butter and chocolate. I think platform engineering, the job of platform engineering is almost to abstract out all that stuff from the developer and leave the developer to develop, right? And the platform engineers creates that platform, whether that platform is cloud native or something else. I'll leave it to the platform engineers and the architects and the business leaders to decide what's best.
What about energy efficiency? I mean, does that go into the motivation as terms of modernization with apps? It seems to me that it is.
I don't know. That would be an interesting thing because I don't remember seeing a lot of surveys over the energy efficiency of a multi-threaded app versus a monolithic architecture.
Yeah, there's research in that space, and there's certainly a lot of applications that are not very efficient in terms of how much heat they generate. But whether that's going to drive a rewrite, I'm not sure, but it's an interesting thought.
Like I said, we will see a big migration to multi-threaded, cloud native stuff when it makes dollars and cents to do it and not a second before.
Our new DevOps Next report will have something to say about this because we asked about for efficiency, for energy conservation, other reasons. What areas in your organization do you have programs around that fall into DevOps, platform engineering, other things like that? Platform engineering came out quite well. So we'll share some more results of that with you pretty quick here. Hang in there.
DevOps Next is coming. Actually, more on platform engineering too. But we're going to take a break here on Techstrong Gang. We've got a lot more to cover. OpenAI acquiring companies. That's a seminal kind of time shift right there. You're watching Techstrong Gang.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
All right, folks, we're back, and as Alan hinted, subtly, we are talking about...
That's pretty subtle.
We were talking about OpenAI has acquired Rockset, which is a provider of databases and some tools that are used for RAG, which exposes data to LLMs. And John, you wrote this story, so we're going to go to you. But one of the things that struck me as odd about the whole thing, or at least interesting, was that a company that is in the AI LLM space is learning how to spell enterprise.
Yeah, exactly. That's maybe the way OpenAI distinguishes itself in this race, right? So we have this race. We talked a few days ago about Anthropic and how they're ratcheting up the speed, and we kind of made this equivalency to a space race. But I mean, what's more interesting to me, and I think what's been picked up by OpenAI, is you want to build out your enterprise elements. In a sense, something that Mitch told me was that generative AI, large language models, cannot rely solely on throwing GPU, NPU, and inference processors at them to meet this kind of the growing demand for ChatGPT. OpenAI must pursue accelerators like Rockset, as Mitch said, to add vector databases, streaming, and data lakes, and other performance data services to deliver. So OpenAI, in a sense, sees an opportunity, and this is very significant in terms of their acquisition, because not only do they acquire the technology, but they are bringing people within the company, which is a little bit of a departure from what they've done before. It's going to be interesting. We're going to see two tracks in generative AI race. One involving speed, which is understandable, but the one that's probably more significant, I think Mitch would agree, is building out within your model the applications that apply to enterprises who are ultimately your customers.
Enterprise, John, right? This is the maturation of Gen AI, part of that progression. It's not just about APIs. Yes, you have to be able to do that. But what Rockset brings, and I've talked to Venkataramani, I believe his name is the CEO, and he and another co-founder came from Facebook. And what they brought with them is very high-speed data retrieval and how to do that effectively. Now, you might say, well, I thought that was vector databases. Well, vector databases are just like one kind of high-speed retrieval. So there's all kinds of analytics and kind of data-driven architectures that they've got that is applicable through Rockset. So I think of it as what they're talking about integrating that within OpenAI's capabilities. So think of it as, I don't need to go get another data analysis or high-speed query type tool that is going to accelerate my ability to utilize this LLM or a small language model, or augment it with other data in and out, which is another thing, by the way, Rockset does really well, is ingest data very quickly. That doesn't have to go into the LLM. So think about our modern AI applications of these hybrids, right? With language models, with high-speed analytics, high-speed data ingestion and retrieval, and APIs built around that. That's what the enterprises are driving OpenAI to make an acquisition like Rockset.
Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I'll be really quick. One other thing that was interesting was that I think there's been a report out that OpenAI is developing a search engine product to compete with Google and Perplexity. So there's that as well. So I just wanted to throw that out because I think it's significant.
Absolutely.
Well, I think it's more than, and it's the answer is it's more than typing in natural language search in, right? That's part of the access to generative AI, but applications don't always talk natural language.
So, I'm reminded of, I guess it was 10 years ago, 8 years ago, Docker. Man, Docker was raising money at crazy valuations. They had the world by the string, I guess is the term we'll use. And they started being acquisitive. They started acquiring a lot of companies within that ecosystem that had grown up around Docker's core offerings. And in many ways, it kind of was like eating your young, because what happened was when Docker would buy a company, all of the other competitors within that particular niche were rendered obsolete because they couldn't compete with Docker itself, with the mothership. So what became a very healthy ecosystem quickly kind of withered on the vine, and Docker suffered as a result, right? Same thing here. They bought Rockset. Okay, what about the Rockset competitors now? Did they say, well, there goes our OpenAI business. We better go mosey up to Anthropic or Google or Llama or whoever.
More acquisitions to come.
Yes.
Well, but it's eating your own young, and you wind up. That's why we talk about cloud native and Kubernetes and not cloud native and Docker, right? And so I would caution OpenAI. And yeah, you want to acquire that kind of technology, but you got to be careful you don't eat your own young and destroy your ecosystem.
Don't you think we're kind of in this hedonist acquisition phase, Alan, of investing in startup companies, buying? Everybody's gobbling up something that they're going to need in their toolbox for AI, right?
Yep.
Stephen, I'd love to get your opinion on this, because one of the things that Rockset is saying is that the value of its approach is that it enables the search and the query to run in parallel against the LLM and the separate database versus what historically has been the LLM runs through its own data first and then it reaches out. And what Rockset is saying is their approach will reduce hallucinations because we will be able to have a better, more trustworthy set of data, shall we say. Is it your sense that the AI guys are trying to figure out ways to reduce those hallucinations to make themselves more relevant in the enterprise, and this is kind of core?
Well, 100%, 1,000%, 1,000,000% now. 100% is all you can get. Yes, absolutely. I've said it before on Techstrong Gang. I'll say it again today. LLM is a user interface. It is not the end of the application. LLM is, in fact, not an application at all. It's a feature. And if, a lot of people have criticized OpenAI, including Google themselves, criticizing themselves and OpenAI with regard to LLMs, because basically there's no moat to an LLM. There's a new LLM all the time. OpenAI should be commended for trying to build some kind of enterprise moat, enterprise momentum here by integrating data. This whole trend toward retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, I think that's the answer, because essentially you can have the LLM be the user interface to an enterprise data set, or, as you guys were saying as well, to a search engine data set. I mean, the nice thing about Rockset is that this company specialized in vector search, and vector databases are the primary database interface that LLMs need in order to integrate real data, not made up data, not fictitious, whatever the AI is going to come up with data. And absolutely, that's what this is all about. I understand what you're saying, that theoretically this could be challenging to the ecosystem. It could be this, it could be that. But ultimately, what I see here is that OpenAI is admitting what I think they certainly know, and what the rest of us probably see about this market, and that's that there is no market until you have a real application, a real product, a real useful tool, and not just we're just playing with a toy here. We're playing with this LLM. Ultimately, you cannot have, even if you have a gazillion parameter, I just made that up, LLM, it will never know everything. In order to have an LLM that is useful, that doesn't have hallucinations, you need to have it integrated with external data sources. And more to the point, in the enterprise especially, but frankly, outside the enterprise too, having an LLM that can query actual data sets and bring and expose real data is really useful, as opposed to the toys that we're playing with.
Stephen, tell me what you think about this. I think we've made the mistake of thinking as an LLM as a database. It's request, send back a response like we would retrieve data out of a database. And I'm not gonna query the LLM for my account balance on my 401k. I'm not gonna trust that it's accurate. That's gonna come out of a different database, out of a different system. I don't need that to go through an LLM. Maybe I use a natural language, a query to do it. No, actually, I probably don't even want to do that in most cases. So I think it's just recognition of the new shiny object. We can't put everything in it. There are some things that belong in it and some things that don't. And that mix of all these existing databases, fast retrieval mechanisms. By the way, I don't have enough compute power to put it all into an LLM anyway. So it's just, to me, it's just being more mature and realistic about how we use generative AI as part of our architecture, not as the only thing in our architecture.
An LLM is that annoying kid that always has an answer for everything. You're like, hey, check out that cool motorcycle. And he's like, well, that's a 1958 Harley, and you're like, really? And then eventually you realize that he's just pulling that. Yeah, he does know a lot about some things, but he doesn't know everything about everything. Send that kid to college, get him a library card, have him look things up, and suddenly he becomes a useful member of society.
Well, let me ask you this. Are we looking at the wrong end of the gold rush here? Because it feels like, to me, we're looking at LLMs and looking at all the miners and the people driving in to cash in on that. And yet the folks who made all the money were shovels. Yeah. And the database guys seem to be the shovel makers for the LLM.
Today, but what's interesting, our friend John Willis and Patrick Dubois and all those folks we had in for the hackathon on operationalizing AI, it's almost a year ago. It was August of last year. By the way, there's a great video recap of that on Techstrong.tv if anyone's really interested in this subject. A lot of stuff about LLMs. I think once this matures a little bit, the LLM may not be the dominant data source for most AI workloads, right? You're going to have SLMs and you're going to have other data sets that are not these Umani, what did you call them, Stephen? 100 gigabit or a gazillion gigabit? Those are unwieldy and I don't think they're going to, you need that maybe as your baseline, universal standard, but most AI workloads are going to use highly specialized data sets.
Or give you the opportunity, like with Perplexity, where you have choices of which one you want to see who's hallucinating, who isn't. It's kind of like what Stephen was saying. Instead of having one friend that knows it all, well, let's have a group of friends and see who really knows the most.
So, Stephen, does this make you laugh a little bit? It's 2024, and we're having the same conversation we had in the 1980s. It's about the data stupid.
Hey man, I was in high school in the 1980s. I don't know what you're talking about here. But yes, it is about the data. It's still about the data, and it'll always be about the data. Absolutely. We need a panel of experts, not just one expert that tells us everything.
It's always about the data. Trying to think, I wasn't in high school in the 80s. No, I was in college, and actually I graduated college in the early 80s. But anyway,
Me too.
all right. I think we beat this one to a fairly well. We're going to take a break here on Techstrong Gang. We've got, poor Kaspersky, or maybe not poor Kaspersky. Let's see what happened here. We'll be back. You're watching Techstrong Gang.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
And we're back. And if you've been around cybersecurity at all, you've heard these conversations that have been going on for years involving Kaspersky software and its ties to the Russian government, which it denies and has denied for more years than I can remember. But Department of Commerce and the Department of Treasury got together and basically said, we're banning that software and we're sanctioning, 8 or 9 of their executives. And this whole thing has suddenly become a much bigger deal. Let's start with John. What's your thoughts on what's going on here since, you've been around this conversation as long as that?
I've been exposed to these guys for about 2 decades. And, first of all, it's an election year, right? So we have the TikTok ban. And I'm not ordinarily, I'm dead set against bans, but the thing about the Kaspersky labs was even dating back, I went to one of their developer conferences in St. Petersburg, and this was almost 20 years ago. And there was a lot of speculation about the ties, not only to the government, to organized crime, not just Eugene, but his ex-wife, who is an executive at Kaspersky. I don't want to slander anyone, but it was very, very mysterious.
Look, please don't.
No. Yeah, I don't even want to. We don't always do. Yeah, they just started here. I don't want to.
I'm on this show.
But under Russian law, right, the government has total access to Kaspersky systems and therefore access to all of its customers. Kaspersky made a huge push in the U.S. market 20 years ago and actually had a fair amount of success. So what the Biden administration is doing, in a sense, is probably something they feel they have to. They don't want the Russian companies like Kaspersky to exploit our data, et cetera. And also, it's an election year. Mm-hmm. To me, it's interesting because, again, we go back to the history of Kaspersky, and I saw some things that were very interesting and kind of frightening around this company. And there's always been an element of fear around them. I mean, this is on the political and cultural side. Getting into the weeds, I think Mitch probably would do a better job of explaining how rational or how legal this is, what we're trying to do to them, or what our government's trying to do to them.
Well, thanks, John. You give me a lot of credit.
I didn't mean to do this to you. Sorry.
But no, that's no. It's sort of like kind of what comes to mind is, does the Russian government know everything that's happening in Russia? If they don't, they can find out, right, or control it. So, of course. So, just put the pieces together. If we're concerned about our critical infrastructure, concerned about everything from every device that's running some type of anti-malware, and if we had a large installed base of Kaspersky, just think about how easy it would be. Let me send out a few new updates, signatures, or whatever it is to the malware updates to those agents, Russian agents, running on your computers. And suddenly, our defenses are down, right? At least in terms of a pathway into a lot of our computers. So many of us at the time when Kaspersky started kind of getting ratings in the magazines and PC World and the different places of, it's a good one. It's up there, with Clam AV and all the, other ones at the time. It was like, but why would I want to do that? Do I really want to, be the next Kevin Mitnick kind of Wall Street Journal story. No, I'm not going to do that. So I think most organizations have said, yeah, this if it's anywhere, it's in the consumer world. I can't believe many enterprise business organizations are running it, or at least if they don't, they're not thinking twice. So it's just a whole vector. It reminds me of the Huawei situation. If you think back a few years, not that many years, maybe probably about 8-10 years ago or so, all the Huawei equipment coming from China and have chips in it that we don't know what they do. Are those backdoors into everything? It's, of course, a company that partially owned by the Chinese government. It's the same issue again. It isn't a free marketplace with unfettered and no strings. Some things come with big strings attached, and is that worth our national security risk to put that at risk?
So I'm going to take a contrary position here. Surprise. First of all, we're a nation of laws, right? And the last I checked, you're innocent until proven guilty. Now, 20 years ago, there was a very different political climate between Russia and the U.S., right? It was early 2000s. I don't even know. Maybe Putin had already come into power, but it wasn't what it is today. What we're seeing here with Kaspersky is pure election year politics at its worst, right? But I do applaud the U.S. government for at least being proactive in this and saying they're doing it versus what they've done to Checkpoint software for 30 years, which is the whisper was always don't use Checkpoint because the Mossad has a back door into your firewall. And Mitchell, you know this, when we sold security into the federal government, Checkpoint was kind of a no-go because of the rumors of that. Absolutely. Now, in the case of Huawei, it was, well, we actually had, I think, more proof that there was absolutely, it was more than just the connection. There was real proof that these chips and backdoors in the Huawei hardware. Now, in the case of, I've dealt with Kaspersky for years too, and I've seen them in enterprise accounts. I thought there was something at some point where they had migrated a lot of their databases and stuff to the U.S. Can the Russian government still have access to it? Absolutely. Can the Russian government still have access to a lot of companies that aren't based in Russia? Let's not be naive. This is election year politics.
Yeah, exactly. There's been a concern in 2017 and now in 2024 that the war in Ukraine and pressure that Biden probably feels on the international stage, especially from opponents, a little suspicious.
I mean, 2017, this has been going on, John. You said
I know.
20 years ago.
Do you think this has anything beyond politics? Because Putin is in North Korea and signing a defense alliance with those guys who happen to be some of the most...
Yeah, well, they hack for a living because that's their gross national product is what they can, steal. But that's what this is about. Let's be clear. I think the real evidence of Kaspersky being used that way is thin. I haven't seen real incidents where you can say they put a fake update in or they did something. Is the potential there? Yeah. But this is, let's close our borders and stop immigration because there could be terrorists in there or drug dealers or child pornography or something else. We're a nation of laws. If you're not going to, you at some point you got to put up your evidence. And
I don't know
the evidence.
I don't know that we're ever going to see the evidence of this, Alan. I mean, we're not talking about industrial espionage here. We're talking about nation state security stuff. And frankly, I think that what you just described actually is the reason for this, not refuting this. If you're in the U.S. government and you are looking at a product that is known to be a pretty good product, very widely used in enterprise and business, you have to decide whether this is something that should be used in national security sensitive places. And frankly, the U.S. government has always been, and when I mean always, I mean like 200 years always been skeptical of non-native born people and non-native born solutions and so on. I mean, remember the requirements for being the president here, but it goes beyond that. if you've ever worked with the intelligence agencies, you know that they are very skeptical about using even people who were born outside the United States. They're just being cautious. I will say, yes, is this election year stuff? Yes, but it's also not. Announcing it now as election year stuff, but having gone on, I mean, it's been banned for 7 years from the federal government, use.
So then what's the story here?
Well, there is honestly not much of a story here, except that they're finally saying what they've already been saying behind closed doors, which is, no matter what the intentions of the people at Kaspersky are, they're still connected with Russia. Putin has a, brutal fascist control over everything in that country. And even if the entire company wants things to be secure and wants things to be open, ultimately they may not have that choice. And I think that that's maybe what's being said as well about other software and hardware solutions from other countries. I don't think that it means that Kaspersky himself is necessarily a bad person, but frankly, it would be pretty easy for Putin's goons to get in there and mess around with it when the time comes, and better safe than sorry when there are alternative solutions.
I think it's more than just politics, though.
Mitch, I got to do this.
Okay.
When the rest of the world does this to our products, because we're just as bad as any of them on many of this, let's not kid ourselves.
Well, let's not both sides.
Don't cry and scream. Talk to Iran about the centrifuges at their nuclear plants. Okay? Israel might have planted it, but that was built here. Right?
That's geopolitics for you, baby. And if Iran doesn't block Israeli software, then they're stupid, and they're not stupid.
It wasn't Israeli software.
John, let me ask you something. Are you worried that this is all going to break down into geopolitical commerce? Because
already has. Yeah, it already has. Alan made some really good points, and Stephen as well. I mean, it's inevitable. And maybe there'll be another foreign-based company that's going to be scapegoated, right, in this war of escalation. We talk about generative AI speed escalation. Then here we have speed escalation in terms of taking part. So, maybe kind of even stepping back, bipartisan viewpoints of tech are pretty consistent now, from the extreme left to the extreme right. Tech is the great whipping boy, the pinata. You can use it for any type of topic you'd like right now, and you'll gain points among the electorate.
And so it's going to change as the different administrations change and different political opinions become, more whatever it is of the main. I think different companies then potentially could be on the receiving end of it.
Yeah, it's kind of a xenophobic almost viewpoint. And also even go back to all this regulation or antitrust talk. It really started with the Trump administration, right? That was June of 2019, and it's been accelerated by the Biden administration through DOJ and FTC. So we're seeing elements of this across the board, and it applies to some of the U.S. companies. So internally,
I think it's also part of an onshoring. It's the chip bill, right? Bringing things back to the U.S. I think that's part of it too.
Supply chain.
Yeah.
Supply chain. And I agree with you. It's election year. Of course, everything's about election year, right? But it is.
It does resonate with a lot of the voters. I mean, I live in a district that's heavily Silicon Valley, and the candidates who are running have intentionally not talked about their policies out of fear of upsetting the companies. But they also don't want to show support to the companies because a lot of their constituents have a lot of complaints about privacy, around escalating housing costs, etc. So it's kind of this fine line. On a national level, it's okay to blast tech, but we'll see more of this.
They may not want their own practices being disclosed either. Who knows what they did in their companies, right? That might be controversial now.
We had Apple in China. I mean, we can go down that road.
Yeah.
So one of our presidential candidates thinks that he's a good friend of certain leaders,
North Korean leaders. Yeah.
And so does this go all away if there's an election and one wins?
No, it never goes away. And I think for whatever reason, right or wrong, tech will continue to be big tech, will continue to be the whipping boy, even though it's probably, It's probably one of the greatest success stories of the American economy today, but it is what it is. Anyway, we are out of time. I'd love to talk about this all day, though, because we're a nation built on immigrants. And Stephen, I have worked with intelligence agencies, and I'm just going to say that. And there were plenty of immigrants there, too. Right? I mean, so that same candidate that you mentioned actually wanted to pass something that if a foreign person comes here into college, they're automatically given a green card. And I am not a fan of any particular candidate, but I love that idea.
By the way, that same candidate doesn't use email either, so
yeah,
it's kind of moot on the Kaspersky.
It eliminates the paper trail, Mitch.
Yeah. Anyway, look, guys, we got to call a break here. Otherwise, we're going to run into the rest of our great lineup of Techstrong TV today. We'll be back tomorrow. Maybe we'll continue this. Who knows? Or we'll have a bunch of new gang members tomorrow and more stuff to talk about.
Hey, Alan, just a plug. Today is the day my exclusive interview with Chris Betts, CISO at AWS.
Playing on Techstrong TV today. So check it out. You can watch it on demand if you go to techstrong.tv, just like every other thing we do. Until then, though, on behalf of Stephen Foskett, John Swartz, Mitchell Ashley, Bonnie Schneider, Mike Bizarre, and myself, have a great day, everyone. You just watched Techstrong Gang.